Hi, I'm here for the second part of my top 30 favorite films of 2014 ranking. In 10th place is The Amazing Spider Man 2, which I think is somewhat of an underrated film. It does feel a bit messy, but Electro's a lot of fun, and there's really emotional stuff involving Gwen Stacy that leads to some of the most emotionally impactful moments from the Spider Man films. Uh, because of some uh, large ensembles of characters and storylines and stuff, I don't think it's as good as it could have been, but I do think that there are times where it comes to being as close as Spider Man 2 for the most emotional Spider Man film. I definitely think that Spider Man 2 is a much better film overall, but The Amazing Spider Man 2 has enough scenes in it that really do live up to the amazing part of the title for it to get into my top 10 of 2014. And I think that if some changes were made, it could have been even higher in the ranking. 9, Batman Assault on Arkham, a very solid, fun animated film that feels very focused on Task Force X, but at least Batman doesn't feel like he's just a cameo. He does feel like he's at least somewhat prominent, and he does have a lot of really cool moments. Joker's really good in it. There's a lot of fun characters that I'm a big fan of. They get a lot to do. 8, Veronica Mars. I liked the show, and I think that the film really does work. Definitely really cool to see Kristen Bell as Veronica Mars, and I think the film has a nice charm to it. It feels like a cool thing for fans of Veronica Mars. 7, A Million Ways to Die in the West. Really fun comedy film that has an amazing ensemble cast, and I watched it a lot, and I really enjoy it. Seth MacFarlane, Liam Neeson, Neil Patrick Harris, Amanda Seyfried, and there are a lot of fun cameos. It really does work. 6, Tinkerbell and the Legend of the Never Beast. One of the better Tinkerbell animated films, in my opinion. Really strong story. I think the characters were handled very well, and there was a lot of good emotions in it. So I think it really does work nicely. And I think that the Tinkerbell films really show what a strong character Tinkerbell can be. 5, Maleficent. One of the better live action Disney films, in my opinion. Maleficent, a very cool, stylish character with a very interesting backstory. A lot of cool stuff is explored. And I do like it a lot more than Sleeping Beauty. I think that it's a film that really works and is quite compelling. 4, Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb. My favorite of the Night at the Museum films. I think that it was a great way to wrap up the trio of live action Night at the Museum films. Uh, I think it handles Larry Daly's storyline very well. Really good stuff from him. Lots of good stuff with supporting characters. And what's done with Robin Williams as Teddy Roosevelt is very emotionally compelling. And the last scene between Larry Daly and the Theodore Roosevelt is beautifully heartfelt and has a lot of emotional impact. So it's a film that really meant a lot to me. 3, My Little Pony Equestria Girls Rainbow Rocks. I'm a huge fan of Equestria Girls, and I think the Equestria Girls films are so much fun. Rainbow Rocks has so many great songs, so many fun moments from main characters, supporting characters. There's so much My Little Pony greatness on display, and it's so much fun. It doesn't work as well for me on a story level as the first Equestria Girls film, but still a film that I love. 2, my favorite Marvel film, X-Men Days of Future Past. A beautiful film that does have a lot of fan service that is very well done, but it also has an incredibly great story about Professor X um, regaining his optimism, and there's lots of very compelling emotional stuff involving him, Mystique, Magneto, and Wolverine. And I love how there's three big villains: Magneto, Mystique, and Bolivar Trask, and they're all involved in the main story, so it doesn't feel like three subplots competing with each other. It doesn't feel like Spider-Man 3 in that sense. Even though I do like Spider-Man 3, I do think it is messier than Days of Future Past. And I love that they're able to find sympathetic qualities to Days of Future Past. Like, it would have been easy to make Bolivar Trask the pure evil one and then have Magneto and or Mystique be the more sympathetic characters, but even Bolivar Trask has a little bit of humanity and feels like somewhat of a fleshed out character. The acting's fantastic, and the emotions are incredibly impactful. And I don't think there's ever been a Marvel film that's impressed me in the same way that Days of Future Past has. And of course, there are other very good Marvel films, and there are really good X-Men films in particular, but Days of Future Past has very much remained my favorite. It would certainly take a lot to top it. But number one for 2014 for me is definitely When Marnie Was There. Not just my favorite film of 2014, my second favorite film in general, and a big part of why I think 2014 was a great year for films. When Marnie Was There is one of the films that's impacted me the most on emotional level, and I think it's the film that I can relate to the most. What the protagonist goes through isn't exactly the same as what I went through, but there's so many layers to her journey and her connection to Marnie that I can relate to, and there are moments that I could feel uncomfortable while watching when Marnie Was There, but I think it builds up to such a beautiful conclusion that is so emotionally satisfying that even the moments that make me uncomfortable at times feel like they really belonged in the film. And it's a film that deals with a lot of impactful emotional issues about family and self doubt, friendship. There's so many incredibly emotionally wonderful things that are explored. And when Marnie Was There, and after I first saw it, I felt incredibly impressed by it. It quickly became my second favorite film, and I've seen a lot of films since then. And there are certain films I consider could be better than When Marnie Was There, but I still feel like overall The Wind Rises is the only film that I would put above When Marnie Was There. And that could change, but I think that I'll always love When Marnie Was There because it's one of the films that I have the strongest soft spot for and such a strong emotional connection to. And people are definitely allowed to disagree with me, but in my personal opinion, When Marnie Was There is one of the greatest films of all time and a wonderful masterpiece that has changed my life in good ways. So it's definitely my favorite film of 2014, and you can let me know what you think of my ranking.